And we're going.
Okay. Yo, I'm exhausted. Okay. What's going on? Today we're going to be talking about literary communities, and a cool title that Elena came up with is basically building a new generation of literary citizens. I think this is going to be exciting. There's a lot to digest as we get into this topic. There's quite a bit that we want to mess around with. And probably going to have a couple of emotional breakdowns in the middle of this conversation.
That's why we're recording, so we can cut them out if needed. Or just leave them, be raw and real. That works too.
If I start crying, just cry with me. But yeah, I'm actually really excited about talking about this stuff. Because I think it's something that now, as I've gotten into graduate school, moved throughout graduate school, made connections here in California, I think it's just realizing that there is a literary community, like there is in any community, but realizing that there are connections to be made and networking to do is something that's really, it's emotional. It's an emotional journey just as much as it is just something to do. I don't know how to explain that. I think it kind of eases my anxiety a little bit, knowing that there's a community. I think the problem though is that it actually adds to your anxiety as well, because now you got to talk to people you don't know, and you got to hope that they're nice and that they're willing to help you. And you got to hope that you can put your foot down and you can make some moves, in the community, in this industry, whether it's a publishing industry or whatever little tiny sub industries there are in this community. You got to have to kind of figure out, am I even able to make a name for myself in a way that isn't, and there are different kinds of ways to make your name in this industry too. So I think this is something that's really important to talk about, especially as people graduate from their MFA.
Yes, I agree. I think I had never even heard the term literary citizenship or literary community until we were in our aspects of a writer class in our very first semester of the MFA. And kind of like you said, Marissa, it was a very daunting term, literary citizenship, because I felt like, it seemed like something else that was work and something to look at. And when you're coming into grad school and, you already have all of these things swirling around in your head that you want to get done. And, you have different thesis projects floating around in your mind. And obviously you want to build a community, because that's a lot of what, at least in creative writing graduate program, is about. But, just this idea that you have to be a literary citizen was, to me at least, was kind of scary, and kind of how do I go about doing that? And I think that a lot of people feel that way as well about the term. But I mean, it is something that's really important and worthwhile to talk about. So I'm excited to get into what we have to say today.
Yeah. Let's see. If I guess, Elena, I need to be the co-host.
I think you are. Does it not say you are?
No, it doesn't say I am.
I'm just going to make you the host then for now.
Okay.
That won't stop the recording, will it?
No, it shouldn't.
Okay, it says you're the co-host, but I'll make you the host.
Does it?
Yes, change the host. Marissa Childs is host now.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah, that's crazy.
Okay.
Maybe I'm just slow.
No, you're good.
Let's see if I can share this screen so people can see our PowerPoint. Okay, yay. Presentations. Okay, cool. So today, we didn't introduce ourselves because y'all should already know by the little boxes and stuff who we are. But I'm Marissa, and that is
Elena.
Yeah. Okay. And we're going to talk about this new generation of literary citizens. And I think we should start really by defining what literary community is. You know what I mean? So I guess let's do different. Let's give our separate individual definitions. What do you think it is?
Oh gosh. I think literary community is a group of individuals who are engaged in reading and writing and discussing of reading and writing and supporting each other in those endeavors.
Mm. I think that's a very good one.
Oh,
It's like
like
a very
that was a
simplified.
basic introduction.
No, I think it's very simplified. And you want it to be that simple for real. Like you want it to be that like easy to like to comprehend. But I think too, what did we put in the introduction of our paper? Because in the introduction of in the paper to this podcast, I think I said a lot of stuff about just like the different roles people play and how in the literary community those roles are kind of like they are interwoven together because different occupations actually follow. Like, for example, if I think specifically about professors, we have professors that aren't just professors, right? They're writers that publish books, they're book reviewers, they're bloggers, they're journalists, some of them are editors and it all kinds of all kinds of kind of works together in that way. But I think if I just define literary community, okay, so this is what I wrote in my notes. I wrote it's a linear model of communication that through multiple approved channels creates, promotes, and discusses written and spoken pieces of literature. Which I thought that was really important. I couldn't quite get an image in my head of what spoken literature would be, but it exists. I know it does. Not besides audiobooks. It exists somewhere.
Well,
yeah.
You can argue that literature was originally spoken because, before people wrote, they were telling stories.
My audiobook argument.
I know your audiobook argument. Marissa thinks that the whole world should just listen to audiobooks. No. We're not talking about that today.
No, but you know what I mean. Like, I think that spoken pieces of literature and written pieces are very much a part of the literary community. And in order to understand that, I think we can even go past our other questions and if necessary, come back to those. But just getting into the features of a literary community, right? Like you have the writer role, the reader role, and then literary citizenship itself. So if we think about a literary community is literally just a discourse community. And that's that linear model, that Aristotelian linear model of communication, where basically we have somebody producing the information for this community and then somebody consuming this information in the community. So the writer role is that role, which is, producing, keeping track of trends, creating opportunities, assisting community progress. And then you have the reader role, which is, consuming, but they also are coming to an understanding of, just how that community works. These two things are really important to know, especially when we're talking about the literary community, because they go hand in hand directly, right? So like I said earlier, we have professors who play the writer role. They're not just our professors teaching us how to hopefully teaching us how to be a part of the community, which we'll get into a little bit of education later. But just, teaching us how to be a part of that community, teaching us what to produce, how to create trends, how to be a part of trends, that sort of thing. But they're also in that writer role producing stuff, right? Constantly putting out blog posts, doing book reviews, doing articles for places like LitHub, that sort of thing. And then we really, as the students, are taking on the reader role and consuming as much as we possibly can until we can't consume anymore to eventually fall into that writer role. Whether you're a professor or you're a publisher or you are a book reviewer, a bookstagrammer, whatever you choose to be. A book blogger. a YouTuber, yeah, that talks about books, please do YouTube and talk about books. That's exciting. But like when you are in that reader role, that's the job you're suddenly in that place of also being a writer. So you're consuming the things that you are learning about constantly and yet still producing stuff, which is so dope. That in all though is equates to literary citizenship, right? So in literary citizenship, and to be a literary citizen is something I took this from our paper because I thought this is so important to point out. I said, literary citizens aren't just members of the community. They are ones that share and take creative initiative, meaning that they play both roles in the discourse. They do this through the approved channels of communication, publishers, literary journals, professors, reading groups, workshops, lectures, conferences, and media. And in a way, it's humbling to understand this community as a two-way street, you know, very much about making sure that I think one of the cool things that I fell in love with when I was first introduced to literary community and literary citizenship, listening to Dr. Leahy speak, she was just like, as a citizen, your job is to not just put things out there and expect people to consume it, but then to consume the same stuff that you expect other people to consume. You're sharing, right? That's like the number one thing about being a literary citizen that I think I just fell in love with, because it's very easy to fall into this into a space where I think most writers, our predecessors, are very used to, this space of like just hoping somebody reads your stuff, just hoping somebody like cares about your stuff. They're just hoping somebody understands where you're coming from, which is where we really get that complex of that writer's complex where we're all lonely and reserved, but you know what I mean? Like, we're really not like that. Most writers have so much personality, have so much to say and want to say it, but feel like just it's naturally in us now. It's almost like an inherited feeling of just not wanting to speak up and not wanting to be out there and talk because you don't think anybody will care anyway, right? And which is I think we talked about this before, just like that idea of writers being really depressed and something wrong. But I think the truth of the matter is we just have a lot to say, and we're always constantly in our own way, whether we are bold and we just like say what we want to say, or we are silent and we keep it all to ourselves. We're all a little afraid that nobody will listen, and so we seclude ourselves. Literary citizenship forces us out of that, right. You know? So I think that is the cool part about literary citizenship. Is there anything that you think is really dope about it?
Well, I was actually one of the things that you were saying about, literary community and being a part of a literary community made me think about this book that we read in a teaching composition class that I took. And the book is called Naming What We Know, The Moves That Matter in First Year Composition or something like that. But anyways, the book is sort of organized by threshold concepts. So like there are these different concepts that all writers, sort of innately know or follow, or should maybe innately know or follow. So in the very first concept in the book is, here, let me pull it up so I make sure I'm getting it right. Writing is a social and rhetorical activity. So in the author of this specific essay in the book is named Kevin Ruzin, and he outlines how writing is always rhetorical because writers are engaged in the work of making meaning for particular audiences and purposes, and writers are always connected to other people. So even though I think a lot of us view writing as a very solitary act, and it makes it hard to kind of wrap our heads around this idea of literary community. In fact, just as you said, like there's such a connection between writers and readers. And, if to write, you're writing for, usually, unless you're writing in your journal or something, which is totally great too, but you're writing for, an audience, and then that audience is, absorbing what you're saying and maybe will write something else, or look, research and read something else based on what you said. So I always kind of keep that in mind, sort of thing that stuck with me as like writing is a social and rhetorical activity. Like it's always about connecting with other people. So
Right. And two, I think it reminds me, I thought about this last night as I was writing my lit paper, because I stayed up to like, I was 6 a.m. when I turned the thing off. But when I was writing it, I realized, and I just went off on this tangent that Dr. Van Meter will probably be like, Marissa, that don't got nothing to do with this. But thinking about writing isn't just, a social act in terms of like, let me write for people. You're writing about these people.
right.
Like you are sitting down, and I think that's the moment where we're the most in solitude as writers, is sitting down observing these other people, whether it's your family, whether you are a people watcher at Starbucks. Don't do that, that's creepy. But like whatever you do, you are actually every day writing about things that you've compiled, that existential experience that you've compiled over time by watching other people, what they do, the decisions they make, and compiling them with the decisions you would make and the things you think about. You know what I mean? And you're producing work, whether that's like creative nonfiction or that's fiction, or that's a rhetorical analysis. You're really using other people and experiences of those other people to write about them. And so writing is a huge social act. It's not just, it's something you probably have to sit down and have your own special time about, and to let yourself process whatever you need to process. But it's still a big part. You still taking so much from society to produce the work you're producing. You know what I mean? So why not interact with it more?
Right.
Why not be a part of it more? And when I say be a part of it more, I'm talking about more than just that ivory tower that we are all under as we get our MFAs now. It's about getting outside of that comfort zone and whatever comfort zone that ivory tower has set up for us. Which we'll get into a little bit more later.
We're going to get into this, aren't we?
Yeah.
Which is good. We need to.
Yeah. So I think this is a good thing to think about. I hope our peers take it seriously when we talk about literary citizenship, though, because it's not just it's an opportunity for you to open up and for you to experience life a little more through, not just through your writing and not just through reading, but through actually interacting with people outside the literary community, inside the literary community, so that you can create work that has a real effect on the world. Like, so that you create work and so that you can release work and so that you can be a part of other people's releasing of work and creation of work. But yeah, I think that is super duper important. I guess, and if we're moving off into, that ivory tower discussion, because that's so real.
That's a real discussion.
The real discussion is, how do we think about the literary community and what barriers there are? Because like we mentioned earlier, like, didn't know anything about that until I was in graduate school. Like I went to school for writing, and I got 2 degrees in writing. I have a professional writing degree and I have a creative writing degree. I ain't never heard anything about anything in terms of a literary community. You never heard of that. Now, had I heard about journals before? Sure. I heard plenty about literary journals, but I never actually heard somebody say, we're a community and we work together to help each other. Like, no, you on your own.
Yeah.
You are literally on your own.
I feel like there's such a misconception too that people are always like, with writers, you're always competing against each other to be
right.
like, oh, I need to get published in this journal, or like they're going to publish me first, or not even to do with publishing necessarily all the time, but in school, we're taught to like compare our grades that we get on papers, and it's not as much about collaboration as it probably should be.
Right.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, girl, go ahead. Go ahead. No, yeah, yeah. I think that kind of gets us into education just a little bit, actually. One of the barriers to literary community, right, is that not being taught about things like literary community, right? Or hearing words like literary citizenship. And because we're focused on curriculum and we're focused on grades, right? Why? No one knows. We still haven't figured out why that matters, because I still don't know how to do my taxes. You would think that literary community would be a big part of the English classroom, or the English classroom in high school and in middle school, so that we can learn how to use literature in our future and in our daily life, which we do use more than math in our daily life. Let's just talk about that real quick. But like, you would think that we would be introduced to that concept just so that we understand what kind of opportunities are out there for us. Being taught about the literary community means you're able to understand things like what book reviews are, and you're able to understand what blurbs are for different books. Those little blurb things that are usually on people's books where people are like, this book was amazing. You get to find out what that stuff is. And I think the publishing industry, if you're exposed to it early as a kid, the publishing industry is less terrifying, right? Because the publishing industry is such a veiled industry. No one knows what's going on half the time unless you're studying it, unless you're focusing on it. And because we don't make it a big deal in the English classroom, the curriculum is very much like, I just want you to be able to spell these words.
Or I want you to write this essay in a very specific way, with your little 5 paragraphs, and then you're never going to write a 5-paragraph essay later in life, but you got to do it now, and that's the only thing I'm going to teach you how to write. So someday, sorry, I'm going off on a tangent. So someday when you're like had a new job and have to write a newsletter, you're like, oh, how do I write this? I don't know. No one taught me.
Sure. No, who are you talking to? Go call out the teacher's name.
I'm not gonna call them. I liked my teachers but I liked my teachers because I was, not to toot my own horn, but I was a queen at the 5-paragraph essay, and they all loved me. But I recognize that now, and I recognize how difficult it was for me later in life to write anything else besides that.
Right.
So because I was so good at it, and because I was good at that, going off. This is like a therapy session. Because I was good at that, I was, praised for that, and then wasn't really taught that I had to know any other way to write.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I ever really acknowledged the 5-paragraph essay. I don't think I really did. And it wasn't until I got into college, literally my sophomore year of college, my favorite professor, who's like literally like an uncle to me. I love him so much. But he literally set us down in class one day. He was like, not on this 5-paragraph stuff. No, ma'am. And we're not doing that. He was like, whenever you have a new thought, that's when a new paragraph starts. I don't want to see 5 paragraphs. Whenever a new thought starts, that's your new paragraph. And I was like, oh, okay. And I think it was something that, like, it was one of the many various experiences I had in college that set me up to be a happy writer. You know what I mean? Because, and along with learning about literary community, it's just something about the English classroom. We're set up in the very early ages of our life, in high school and in middle school, in our English classrooms, to think that all that there is to English is literature, which is such a big, important thing for us to talk about, because as we get into, understanding the difference between composition and literature, and that battle between composition and literature, big part of education now is just literature. In terms of English classrooms, it's just literature. I don't know if you remember those big thick literature books that had all the short stories in them.
Oh, like anthologies?
No, they were
Or
anthology. Well,
you mean, are you talking about in like middle school or high school or college?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, they were like textbooks kind of, and they had.
Yeah, they were textbooks. I think I read the same stories every year out of each textbook. I
Yeah.
think there was a one particular story. It was like the quilt, and it was like it was like the one black short story we read in school about this quilt and this lady putting all these different pieces together and over from slavery on to make this one quilt. And I think about that often because while the stories were good, the fact that that's the main story I can remember is always boggling to me. And it makes me think about what I'm exposed to in English class, right? Like, I can remember reading stories, but I can barely remember spelling words or learning grammar or that sort of thing. And I always find, I think every writer, this is such a basic thought, but every writer finds this boggling. How is it that as writers, how is it that you can talk all day about the final product of a piece, but not the process of getting to that piece? You know what I mean? Like, that's what an English class should be like.
Yeah, it's because we're taught. Sorry, can I answer this question?
No, go ahead. That's why I was asking.
I feel like I'm just talking about all of my composition pedagogy class, but because we talked about this all the time, but it's because we're taught product-based pedagogy instead of process-based. So yeah, they're only emphasizing the grade at the end of the day and not the process that it takes to get you to the grade, which is why, yeah, it has something to do with that.
I think that
One part of it.
yeah, that is like, I think that's the biggest part though. That's why I brought up curriculum, right? And I really wrote this down in my notes, but I didn't really get into it in my notes because I didn't want to get angry. But I remember taking my pedagogy class in my undergrad and I remember I was the only freshman in a graduate's class. And, wow. And I remember sitting there and being like, yo, like, ain't this a little like stupid? Like, why are we like testing kids on whether they can read and not testing them? Like, you know how in the big, well, I don't know if they do these in Oregon because I'm from Arkansas. So like we had these ACTAP tests. Did y'all do ACTAP? No.
We had like the state testing, or was it different than that?
State testing. It was state testing. I can't believe I remember ACTAP, but yeah.
I don't think mine was called that, but we did, like, we had the ones on the computer and the reading comprehension questions and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I think, I'm trying to see. I think for ACTAP, for us, we had to write everything. So there was reading and then there was like writing, but it was that writing was an association with reading.
Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't just like, write freely, answer this question. No, they were like, read this first, then using this evidence, write this. And then you were like, oh, okay. And then they were like, oh, a 1. You got a 1. But
right. That's how the GRE was too. I don't know if you took the GRE, but
I did. Yeah.
Well, I think I got like a 3 or a 4 on the writing portion, which out of 6, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know what you were just trying to get me to write about, but obviously I failed.
Right. I missed the information. I missed the point, but I think that was very much a part of the trauma of being in an English class. Was that I got a curriculum to follow as a teacher. I have a curriculum to follow. My kids might not be learning, but at least they know how to read sometimes. And then like for the student, the trauma of like not doing well based off of some standards somebody else set up. You know, that kind of writing takes time. It's a process. We got to talk about Richard Bausch here because Richard Bausch constantly is saying, yo, read. That is how you become a better writer. But also, you got to practice. You know what I mean? You can't just like consume other people's information and not and then be like, well, I'm gonna just write, because all you're gonna be doing at that point is just writing down whatever you just consumed, word by word, instead of actually creating your own voice, creating your own tone. Which is why it's always interesting. So I was reading up on the literary crisis, of the literacy, excuse me, not the literary, but the literacy crisis of 1970, which is one of the biggest motivators for why composition was brought into the college setting.
Right.
Kids weren't being taught how to write, but then we're in the real world. For some reason, it took people a really long time to figure out that in the real world, we still got to write down stuff for other people. It's okay if you can't write a sentence down completely for yourself, as long as you understand them. But if you got to write down sentences for other people, you got to be able to complete them sentences so other people can understand the mugs, right? And I think it just amazes me that it took that long for people to figure out, hey, we might need to bring writing classes into colleges so people know how to do their job, like, and so that other people know what job they need to do, and so we can have proper communication. What's the point of creating communication if we're not using it properly?
Yeah.
And why is this not happening from, not even necessarily from elementary, probably from elementary too, you need to start there, but especially from middle school and definitely into high school? Why is that not available? That doesn't make sense. You got kids out here using commas at the beginning of their sentences and at the end as periods. Like, you gotta figure out when you're gonna bring that in and how it's gonna really have an effect on students, and how it's gonna have an effect on their future and their jobs and the jobs they choose and all of that. Like, that matters. I just don't understand how anybody could think that doesn't matter. I don't know if you have a point to make on that.
I don't know. I just, the one thing that I was thinking of was learning how to write, and like truly as a process, I feel like it's really like learning how to think critically.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Okay, that's all I have to say. I'm just gonna leave it there. No. I don't. But yeah, we just went on a tangent about writing education, but I think it's important to talk about with literary community, because I mean, I think that there are probably certain schools out there that do a really great job at this, but like, obviously you or I don't think we're either part of those.
Right.
Or, not to just totally bash on our educations, but because I'm sure they served us really well because we're here, right? But yeah. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, you're right. No, I thought about that too a little bit in terms of access. Like, what does it mean? On one hand, I brought up really how important it is that we mentioned that we didn't know about literary community until we got to college, because I didn't hear about it until I got to graduate school. Okay, I went to school for writing and didn't hear about it. Right. So there's something to say about, I guess there's something to say about this, because when I think about growing up in Arkansas, in a state where writing and English are not the jam, they're not the vibe. Ain't nobody finna hype you up about being a writer. And you go to a program that's rather small, but they're very passionate about what they do. I realized at the last few years, or last 2 years of my degree, my undergrad, my professors were really hyping up this idea of us like going on trips to go to conferences like AWP. Now, Chapman, AWP is something that is paid for us. We can go and that sort of thing. But at UCA, that was not available to us. And they wanted us to go to these things so bad. They wanted us to go to these conferences, but they understood that we didn't have the money. That was like not even up for discussion, right? And so they would be like, well, why don't you guys get together as a group, compile some money, and all go together, right? And do this. And really, my school, UCA, they did not hype up AWP. AWP is expensive. They didn't hype that up. Whichever ones they could find for us that were free, that's what they would tell us about. You know what I mean? which gets into the money aspects, right?
Yeah.
Of, you know, having access. Um, do you have the access? Do you have the money to go to these book fairs, these conferences? Do you have the money to do these journal subscriptions? Probably not. If I'm being real with you, I
Yeah.
don't.
I I know I think I told you this, Marissa, but when I was doing some initial research for this talk, I just Googled, like, did the basic Google search, like, how to be a good literary citizen. And a good portion of the articles mentioned journal subscriptions and mentioned them as a good investment. And I think that's, and like, I do think that they're a good investment.
Mm,
But one of them was saying you should reserve like $30 a month to your journal subscriptions. And I
mm,
think, and like, I think if you are a person who wants to write for journals and um, you're, choosing a select few journals that are like applicable to you and interesting to you, then that's great. But I thought I was kind of got mad that that was like one of the top things on the list, because I felt like there are so many things you can do to be a part of a literary community that like shouldn't cost you money. Um, but
right, right. No, and that's so real. There, man, that's so real. There was that article you sent from AWP that talked about like it kind of got it was talking about the ways the literary community is taught in the classroom, right? In the writing classroom, in a university setting. And something that was mentioned was just like, yo, um, being a literary citizen is actually kind of expensive, you know?
yeah.
And I was like, wow, what? I've never subscribed to journals because I don't read them. I'm not gonna put, I'm not even gonna act like I read those. I don't. Like, I've realized, I think especially, we've talked about this and we both take Irish Lit, right?
Yeah.
Like, this semester has affirmed to me that I don't have to consume every bit of literature in the world. It just cemented that in me. Like, not everything is meant to be consumed. I'm a girl that is all about positivity and love and joy and truly bringing peace to myself, right? And not every piece of literature has to be consumed. But I think too, what I've learned through going to being in college and going into graduate school is that not every writer is about that. And some of them search for chaos, like search for, we've had this experience in a class where somebody was like, I want pain. Like, like we have to deal with that. And that is very much present even in journals, that chaos and that confusion and that heartache. And, I don't see the point in subscribing to something that in the long run isn't going to bring me positivity and joy in life. That is very much a part of who I am. I'm down for conferences. I'm totally down for book fairs. I'm down for all that. But journal subscriptions, I don't submit to them and I don't read them. I don't read the journals because I feel like
Yeah.
if I'm not going to read the mugs and I'm not going to submit to those mugs, why would I give my money to it? Like,
Yeah. I don't know. I think I always feel bad because I'm pretty much feel the same way as you about literary journals, because I think that like I've just never personally been very interested in them, like reading or writing for them, but I do like acknowledge that there are some like really wonderful ones out there, and who do get important voices heard, especially in more more like niche journals that publish like disability short stories, or are trying to, or voices that aren't normally uplifted. I think that journals are great for that. But
mm-hmm,
it's also it's kind of, for me personally, like I've never read journals widely other than just like for classes and things like that. But I
mm-hmm,
think that's something that's on my list, to like look for more journals maybe that do highlight voices that aren't normally heard in the literary community, just because it's something that like I want to learn more about. I totally, yeah, especially if you're trying to choose what you're going to spend money on. And if, you don't want to spend your money on a journal subscription, that's totally valid.
Right. I think, well, I'm not going to say I'm right. I'm probably not right. I know a lot of people like, you are the worst kind of literary citizen.
No.
But like, go ahead. My bad.
Well, I think we'll get into this more later, but I also think that there's sort of this like tension between like being an academic literary citizen and like a literary citizen who is
And part of
just
the
like
general
your
public.
average consumer who's reading, maybe bestsellers or or is really into genre fiction or something like that. And that literary community is huge within itself because and I know both of us sort of straddle that line of like being in both communities because we both like enjoy genre fiction and things like that. And we also are like in an MFA program and we like appreciate literary fiction. And so I think this brings in questions of this, and I'm sorry if I brought this in at the wrong time.
No, this is a free talk, so just bring it in so that we can talk about it openly, because I think that is also a big part of like what this talk, it needs to be had freely and openly. That's why I'm just being honest. I don't do journal subscriptions. I
know. I'm like Miss Diplomatic. I'm always like, well, I could see how someone would want to do that. I'm like, that's just me. That's my personality.
I think that's fair though. Like reminds me of Trifina Nadres. Oh my gosh, Trifina, we were talking. She had made a comment on my workshop piece one day, and I like, instead of just commenting back on the canvas or whatever, I was like, yo, like, I'm gonna just text her. And I text her, and we were talking about something, that we were taught by Richard, which is like that idea of, when you put something up or when you're writing something, make sure you're giving enough to the reader so that they can follow along and stick to the story. You don't want to ever know more than them, right?
Yep.
And I don't necessarily agree with that. For whatever reasons, I always found a way to use that and flip it. But Trifina was like, Richard said this, and I was like, mm-hmm. And she was like, well, I respect you and your belief. And I think that's a big part of also a big part of being a literary citizen is respecting each other's boundaries, respecting each other's way. You would think that would be innate in us, but as I've learned in workshop, it's not. So it's that's also, I think, a big part of being a literary citizen is being able to be like, well, maybe such and such. Because that's, like I said earlier, that's a part of who we are as writers, is the being able to observe the people and understand not understand completely to the point where we are enabling things or, but respect boundaries where there are boundaries. And I think money, for some reason, is so messed up. Money and education are definitely places where, like, you gotta respect boundaries. It kind of reminds me of a couple of weeks ago when I brought up the thing about Scholastic in Dr. Gale's class, and I was talking about, if you didn't have no money, you wasn't going to the Scholastic Book Fair. You could sit your tail down. Like everybody later on in like the chat and stuff, everybody was like, oh, Marissa, I'm so sorry. And I was like, what are y'all talking about? It is okay. I am fine. Like,
yeah, you're like, that was my reality.
Yeah.
And I'm just stating it.
Yeah, I was just sharing, but like don't think I didn't figure out how to get books I wanted, because I figured out how to get books. Okay.
I'm sure, knowing you, I'm sure you did.
I figured out how to get my books, but like, I mean, it's so interesting that you gotta have money to get knowledge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and not just for college. We talk about college and we're like, yo, we gotta spend such and such money. But even to get the literary community knowledge I got, my mama had to spend $1,900 for me to get here. To sit in a classroom and have somebody tell me use the words literary community. You know what I mean? Not that it wasn't worth it. Not that I haven't done awesome things while I've been here, made awesome connections, but just the fact that you gotta spend money to get knowledge. We live in the time of social media, Zoom, and all kinds of YouTube, all kinds of stuff. And the fact that I had to move across the ocean, move not across the ocean, but across states and live in an apartment for over $1,000 of rent for somebody to tell me, hey, you're a part of a literary community and you are a literary citizen is ridiculous. It should definitely start when you are able to get free education. You know what I mean? Like when you're able to actually, when you're actually like able to, I don't know, sit in a classroom comfortably. English class in middle school and in high school should be that gateway. It should be the gateway for a lot of different careers.
Yeah.
Honestly, but I digress, bro. Like I think education is a big part of an issue that we have in terms of access to the literary community. We're able to read, but are we able to be a part of composition? Are we able to, there's more than one part to literary community, and there's more than one part to English and literature. Composition has to be included. And then, of course, if we move on to the next point, we have information and misinformation that somehow we didn't fall into in the middle of any other part of this. But I think when we're talking about information and misinformation, we're not just talking about in education. Of course, in education, that misinformation you might get, which is so funny because Michael Wong, I told you about Michael Wong, who came to the school last week. He was talking about copywriting and having a career in copywriting and actually be able to make money. As when you're in an English class in middle school and in high school, people are telling you you can only be a teacher. If you decide you're gonna major in English.
Still today, when I tell people what my graduate degrees are in, they're like, "Oh, are you gonna teach?"
Yeah.
Which, like, I might, just to be completely honest, like I might, but but the fact that that's the, the go-to.
Yeah. And
you like to read and write, that's like the go-to. Oh, that's the practical job for you then.
Yeah, I think too, kind of like, I've had a couple of people in my congregation that I will be in field service and I'll be like, so how's school going? And I'm like, oh, it's going good. I wrote such and such. Will you graduate this time and this time? They're like, oh, wow. So what you gonna do? You gonna be a teacher? I went to get an MFA to be a teacher. Is that what you're saying right now? Like, that's how I feel. I feel a little bit attacked but you recognize that it's ignorance though. It's one of those things. They don't know what you can do with that. They don't know that you can do copywriting. That you can make thousands of dollars copywriting.
Yeah.
They don't know that, they don't know. And it's weird because you would think that people recognize, I think this is mostly in America. If I think about places like Korea or Japan, where writing is serious, like in America, it's for some reason we don't realize that it takes a writer to write your commercial.
It does.
It takes those movies you're watching, even as bad as that movie might be, most likely it came from a book first. Like, you know what I mean? So even contracts, it took a writer to write that mug. So it's interesting that we are the most influential, yet the most undermined and most disrespected in the education realm before we even hit college. Like before we hit college, people like, I don't know what you're gonna do with English. And we're being misguided, which is why when we do this student teaching hour in a couple of weeks, what day is that? May 15th? The first day is May 15th?
The first day.
Yes, it's going to be so dope because then we'll get to talk about that misinformation. So in part about education, but even more so, we'll get to think about how we define diversity and representation, which if we click on this real quick, let's see. Hey, leave me alone now. Okay. But this is a cool article, and I think I just want to show the show the title so people can see. But this is a cool article because not only do we get misinformation about our value as writers and our value even as readers, because readers are also just as valuable in the literary community, not for just because they consume, but because they interpret, they analyze, and that sort of thing. We get misinformed about who has access to this stuff. Like, I think what's brought up in this article, so how the literary class system is impoverishing literature. So what she brings out in this article, Miss Lorraine, I think is something that's very like, it kind of makes me think about this question, like, what is in your library at school? What makes up your school library? I don't know, and for some reason, I don't know why I didn't remember this or why this never comes to my mind, but when I was in high school, I didn't have a library. We didn't have a school library.
Really?
Yeah, we didn't have a school library. It was a Turkish-owned school.
Oh yeah, you told me that once.
Yeah, it was a Turkish-owned school. And although it was a public school, it wasn't federal, it wasn't like funded, it wasn't under a school district that was federally funded.
School or?
It was a college prep.
Okay.
It was a college prep school. So although we had like a room that was called the library, we had a room that was called the library, and there were books in there, but they were like, there weren't books for kids. They were like random books that people donated. And yeah, it was chaotic. Middle school, of course, there was a library. But that library was always full of books that didn't represent who I was. Yeah. Right? Like, yeah, I'm Black. I think, especially in middle school, I went to a majority Black Hispanic school. So the librarian really worked hard to make sure that there were books. Most of the books were of Black kids and Hispanic kids and adults too, but they were all in jail, or they were all, like struggling or being bullied in school or something like that. And that was never who I wanted to be. And that wasn't who I represented. You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm Black. That's cool. I'm a Black girl on the front cover of a book. But this brings me back to my Irish Lit paper, like thinking about how we think about the stuff we write and how we think about the characters we create. Do we think about them as humans, or do we think about them as colors, or do we think about them as cultures, and do we think about them as belief systems? Because we have the power, literally, we have the power to write those very books that we want in the publishing industry, what we want to be diverse, what we want to claim as diverse. And we have, and that's so important to remember. We have that power. And it's important to remember because we have little kids in schools that are majority Black, majority Hispanic, majority. Is it possible that a school can be majority Asian? Yes. Yeah, but like, are they really being represented as humans? Or do they feel human?
As a stereotype? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a really good question, and one that I wish that more people took into account, for sure.
It's just something I thought of because that also influences, kind of, Miss Berry was more bringing up the fact that, as writers, we don't all have access to summer internships and don't all have access to the knowledge we need because the classes we grew up, like how we grew up. But it takes me back to that idea of education. Are we taught, or are we told that this is possible for us? If you mostly bring books into the library that show Black kids and Hispanic kids being arrested and not really overcoming that and being traumatized by that, or being bullied and not really overcoming that and being traumatized by that, and never bringing in books that show Black kids as businessmen, or never bringing in books about, they don't realize that is available to them.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's never an image in their mind. What
Yeah.
they get in the library is like, yo, like, my homie got shot, or so and so went to jail, or you probably would be surprised to hear a kid in middle school say, I ain't never seen a Black female doctor. Like, that would blow your mind. Look, what are you talking about? There are plenty of books about doctors. Plenty of books about Black doctors, Black medical life. Like, but they don't have access to that. They don't even see that as something that is available to them because it's not in their library. And so even to getting what Miss Berry talks about is her students in New York, and how a lot of them, if we're just talking about on the financial, still talking about money, like they don't have time to be going and getting these outside internships that don't pay nothing.
Right.
But at least they got to this environment where they know that's available. You know what I'm saying? It's just crazy that at least they got to the environment where they know that's actually available to them, and they can figure out how to gain access to those internships and that information. Kids who don't grow up with even the knowledge that they can do that never get to that point where they can even have a discussion with themselves about what money they got to spend on this internship and on this apartment in New York City. Yeah. They don't have that. And I just think that was the biggest thing that like popped up to me in terms of this article. We are misinformed about what it takes to educate our kids. Me and you don't have kids, but when we have kids, I'm gonna be on somebody's tail about bringing some books in the library that shows my kid who they can be. Like, it's one thing for the parent to be like, you can be such and such. It's another thing for the kid to see such and such. You know what I mean? That really just came to me really strongly.
Yes. And because I mean, like you're saying, kids who are in school and aren't exposed to, literature about them or about people like them, they're not even going to get to the point where they can recognize what a literary community is. And I mean, like I didn't even really know what a literary community is, and I grew up in a very affluent area with with a lot of representation of people like me, and it's still because of some of those other issues that we talked about, like education and things, I didn't even know that I'd never heard of the term literary community. I guess I what it is kind of innately, or some people do, but
yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's why it's kind of hard for us to put into full context what literary community is because it's like reading. I don't know what this is with writers. I think this happens with most writers, but we can read something and be like, and completely not know what one of the words in the sentence is, what one of the words in the sentence is, but we keep going and know what they're talking about. That's what here literary community is like. Like, literary community sounds like something where it's a group of people talking about books. That's what it sounds like. But as you dive into it more, you realize that there are a bunch of subgenres and subtopics of that. That even in that discussion of all those subtopics, you have to have discussions like, what is diversity? Especially now, we're in a time where, talking about diversity, it's something interesting because there was an article in 2015. Why did I forget to put this in my notes? I forgot the name of this article, but I used it for a podcast a year back. And this particular, I was about to call him my brother, my bad. This particular writer was discussing how crazy it is that in publishing in 2015, they were still talking about, let's diversify, and hadn't figured out how to diversify. They were just having discussions about let's diversify. And I think what's funny about that is going back to what I was saying earlier, as writers, we got to figure out what diversity means. Because we are crying, hey, publish me because I'm a Black writer, or public, not because, but I'm a Black writer, I need to be represented, publish me.
Yeah.
But then our characters are not fully representing the environment, not fully representing the world we live in, which is a diverse world. We don't act diverse. We segregate ourselves all the time, but we don't write stories like that. And when we do write stories like that, and I think particularly about interracial love stories, for example, when you write interracial love stories, and especially when I write interracial love stories, it takes training to write those people as just people, not as a Black woman and not as a white man, or not as an Asian man and as a Black woman. Like, it takes literal train of thought to just write these people as people. And I wrote this in my Irish Lit paper. Like, that's because our predecessors have set up this pattern where they were taught that they're not just people, you know? And it goes back to Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where he talks about the oppressor taking on the persona of the oppressed. I mean, the oppressed, vice versa. So the oppressed taking on the persona of the oppressor, because it goes both ways sometimes. And realizing that even in that moment where you're trying to move out of being oppressed and move into a position of not necessarily power, but just a position of mental freedom, you are having to fight that oppressor, because that oppressor is the guideline that has painted who you are, basically, you know. And I've talked about this before in Irish Lit, especially, but like Frantz Fanon and his ideas on basically having on a white mask as a Black man, right? We have those layers that create us, and that white mask isn't just a mask, it's actually who we are, you know. Like, because I'm a Black American woman, so much of me has been made up and painted by white standards, white beliefs, you know. Being American is not necessarily being white, but those ideas come from people who are white.
Yeah, and
Right.
our society pushes forth, you know, like the idea of what it is to be an ideal American that is pushed forth by our society is, you know, to be as white as possible, at least.
Right.
Like the American dream is very rooted in whiteness. I don't need to get, never mind.
No. We've talked about this a little bit before on the phone. I know this was a long time ago, but we talked about this and just how, like, because like that is, it's almost embarrassing. It's a little humiliating, because when people come over here as immigrants and they're like, I want to be a part of the American dream, man, oh my gosh, this made me think about this last night. And this is, I don't know if this is disrespectful or not, but I was watching Kung Fu on CW. Have you seen that? Like the preview for that?
I have.
It's basically a show about a Chinese American family, and particularly a Chinese American girl. And of course, there's like fighting in it, there's kung fu in it, and this sort, all that. But as I was watching it, I was like, this is like the whitest. This about a white. First of all, it's on CW, so you already know it's going to be some chaotic, like what is going on kind of writing. But yeah, as I was watching it, I was like, you know, I'm a drama watcher, so I'm like an Asian drama watcher. So I was like comparing the Asian dramas I watch usually to like this one particular show in America that's supposed to be focused on Chinese culture and Chinese family. But then I remembered that family's American. Yeah, you know what I mean? And so even as I was like, yo, this is so white, bro. And even as I was saying that, I was realizing that it's because they're American that it comes off that way. And it's just interesting that like we don't realize just how much of us is that, you know. And so that's why I always bring up when I talk about Fanon, although you have that white mask, and that is very much a part of who you are, being an American, being colonized is going to typically mean that you are very much made up of whoever is oppressing you. it also means that when you take that mask off, you underneath that is your humanity. And that's what you have left. And they're just these basic things that make us human that should push us to feel unique. So even if the social expectations and beliefs are so embedded in us and they're not necessarily who we want to be, we're still uniquely human. And I think that is where diversity, this epicenter of diversity is, recognizing that which makes us uniquely human. Then you're bringing in real diversity. We have, as humans, we have the natural right, the natural ability, let's emphasize ability. We have the natural ability to make a choice. You know what I mean? Animals run on instinct. You know what I mean? There are certain things they just gotta do when it come down to it. When it's the season, they gotta do this. They gotta go get babies and pregnant and on instant, right? But for humans, we have a choice. We can choose not to do this and not to do that. We can choose to create words to represent ourselves. I brought this up, and I think it was nonfiction, creative nonfiction, but just how arbitrary words are. Even diversity is an arbitrary word. It can mean anything, right? But we choose to let it mean like a multitude of things. And that's even more, that I think that emphasizes more just how important it is to recognize that diversity and representation shouldn't just be about, shouldn't just be about color. It shouldn't just be about religious beliefs. It shouldn't just be about social beliefs. It should be about what makes me uniquely human. And once we start thinking about that, it makes us better writers, and it makes us better publishers. It makes us better editors. Like it makes us better book reviewers and bloggers and all that.
Yeah.
We have 5 minutes before you probably have to go.
Okay, we can keep going. We can do like 20 more minutes probably.
Okay. But yeah, I think that was super. That is just like a big thing that is that hits me really hard when we're talking about a barrier. Now it's not just affecting your English and your literature understanding. Like it's not just affecting how you read, and it's not just affecting how you write. It's affecting who you communicate with. Because the literary community is something that is I don't want to say mostly white people have access to it. I don't want to say that.
I mean, that's true though.
You think so?
At least the type of literary community that, I mean, I think it's changing. I really do. But I mean, I'm a white person, so I'm probably biased, but I feel like, I probably don't see it the same way you do. But I think that, yeah, I think that the literary community is still like predominantly white. Like I know or should we bring up that Lee and Low?
Oh yeah, Lee Low.
Because I think that it's a really good visual example of at least employment in the publishing industry, which are kind of a bit gatekeepers to what is like being talked about in the literary community, is still predominantly white. And I think that, this was, so the original study was done in 2015. And then this study, it was done again in 2016. So it was kind of looking at diversity in the publishing industry based on race, gender, sexual orientation, and disability. And I believe that there were no major like differences between 2014 and 2019. So maybe when I said, I think it's changing, I don't know that the stats would necessarily lie with me now, or would necessarily, lie with me. But I think that also this was 2019, and we're in this like a really big time of change right now in our society in a lot of ways. So maybe you know, the 2021, 2022 numbers would look different. I don't know. But yeah, it is a very white, looks like female dominated industry.
Yeah. No. Humanities
Straight,
is.
non-disabled white females are who are running the publishing industry right now, which, you know, honestly makes sense because there's a lot of romance books out there.
Yeah. Well, I think too, like realizing that humanity studies itself is very much a white female dominated field, especially when we're talking about the ivory tower. In terms of like which is very interesting when you think about the professors you have. But I think you are right to say that it's changing. You know why I agree with you on this, bro?
Why?
So I've been applying to like jobs with HarperCollins and Penguin Random House, whatever. Yeah. But the UK, not even America. Like in America, okay, I've applied to a couple, but the UK has a BAMA program, which is like a minority program where they are hiring people from underrepresented communities. And they've been doing this since 2019, and either 2019 or 2018. And the cool part about it is that they don't take CVs. They don't take cover letters. They're just asking you 3 questions. You just have to answer those 3 questions.
Wow.
That's it. And then
so
also all
like a resume or anything?
No, you don't send a resume. Wow. Or anything. They don't even ask for it later. They don't tell you they ask for it later in the process of like, you know, doing orientation or all of that, being a finalist. They don't ask for it. Wow. You don't need it. And that's a big deal. You know, unfortunately, it's in the UK, so that means if you are American or, you know, there's a bunch of visa things, or, you know, that sort of thing, trying to figure out if you can get a visa, can you get certificate for sponsorship and all that in England. But just the fact that it's available. Yeah. You know what I mean? Awesome. Like, that's amazing. And then the process too is non-discriminatory. So I think that's something to think about. And too, thinking about Miss Fairbank a couple of weeks ago when she came, that Miss Fairbank from Fairbank Literary, I actually ended up bringing this up, and I didn't make an astounding point about it, but like just the fact that, because I think Maya brought up the fact that, right now everybody's on this like trendy, this little niche thing where they're publishing books by people of color or by BIPOC, you know, everybody like, oh, yeah, let's do that because it's serious. But when it all dives down, what's going to happen? You know, and as I brought up, you know, I'm actually kind of terrified that even because I'm not really big right now and worried about publishing my own stuff. I'm not tripping. But for those who are tripping, what does that look like in the future? Their book's not ready right now. So will they be seen and cared about and represented in the future? And what was interesting, this is why this 2019 diagram is so interesting. Because what she said in response was like, I think I have hope for it. I appreciated her being honest and be like, I have hope. She wasn't saying, yes, we're going to figure this out. She was just saying, I have hope that it works, because what's been happening recently in the publishing industry is that people of color are being hired to sit at the table. You know,
so important.
Yeah, that probably is first and foremost. Now, if we could get our minds wrapped around how we view each other so that there is a balance, because in everything in life, there's supposed to be a balance. Everything. But specifically in publishing, there still needs to be a balance of, okay, we have white authors, we have Black authors, we have Indian authors, we have, you know, biracial authors. Like we have authors of this sex and authors with this sexuality, and we have authors with these disabilities. Like that is going to be so important, because you don't want to fall off into, all right, like I'm gonna publish these books, and they get so caught up in publishing these books by these Black people or these white people that you only do that. Because that's the problem now, is that everybody's mostly publishing white books, and white people feel more comfortable or most confident sending their stuff to big publishers and even to indie publishers. Like, they feel the most comfortable and the most confident to do that because they have the proper education, even if they don't have the proper education. Let me say that, because some white people can't write.
A lot of them don't.
Yeah, a lot of them don't, but there's something about that. There is that privilege. That's an example of that privilege. I never can bring a proper example of white privilege up, but like, that's the example of that privilege. You have the confidence to send your stuff to people who finna make you some money, and you have more of a chance. Y'all understand each other. Y'all understand what you want to do, and there's more of an opportunity for that. You still have literary agents and publishers who use not really knowing much about Black people, or not really knowing much about women, or not really, whatever your excuse is for the reason why you won't pick this book up. You see what I'm saying? So you have that confidence. Not you specifically, Elena, but like white people in general.
I'm like, where's my confidence?
No, you have that confidence of knowing that you have access. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's access for sure. And I think hope is a really good word to use to describe the situation, because you hope that these numbers will change within the next few years, and you hope that big publishers especially will continue to hire people from diverse backgrounds and publish the words of people from diverse backgrounds, and that they're not, doing it right now just to give themselves like a pat on the back and say, look at us, we're a part of the, we're being diverse because it's 2021 or 2020, 2021. And, it's something that's going to be like moving forward. And I think it's also up to us as the new generation of literary citizens to, find ways to like hold organizations and like the industry accountable to make sure that they're starting that movement and continuing it, so that we can get to that place that you were talking about where all like there's a lot of literature out there that represents lots of different types of people,
and not just different types of people, but different types of people together. Like actually because I feel like our generation, even though I think I'm Gen Z and I think you're a millennial.
I'm a millennial, borderline Gen Z.
Yeah.
I consider myself a millennial.
We're kind of both borderline Gen Z, millennial, but we still were able to grow up with an environment in a world where we had access to other people of different cultures, right? Not just through internet, but actually being able to interact with people, and become friends with people who didn't look like us, didn't eat what we ate, didn't sleep how we slept. Like, you grow up, when you grow up in an environment like that, I think it's easier to then see where the problem really lies, in terms of how we think. Because really the problem, in whether we're talking about education or we're talking about diversity in publishing, the problem really lies on how we think about the word diversity and how we think about representation. And that, even that too, really, it starts in your house. It starts from home, but it can be shifted and changed by the system, the education system you're in, right? Like, if I think about my grandmother, I feel like this is such a personal perspective. A lot of this is personal, but I think when I think about my grandma, who was a mathematician, or is a mathematician, she alive. My grandmother, she is a mathematician, but she is a Black female mathematician. Okay. And so a lot of my growing up, she owned a private school, and I went for both kindergarten and for pre-K and kindergarten, I went to her private school. man, when I think about my educational life, I'm like, wow. But when I think about it, it makes me realize that I didn't really have strong connections to literature as a kid. My grandma's a mathematician. She a Black woman. And we looking at the publishing industry, and it's about literature, and it is majority white. Like, and so I really didn't have a strong hook to to any kind of idea of literary community as a kid. I didn't have that. And where I got the most influence, I've written about this before, but most of my influence came from being homeless and like only having a library to like kick it at after school. But another big part of it was like I had teachers in high school, especially, who were like, Marissa, you should write. You know, I had after school writing classes where teachers are like, Marissa, you should get into writing. This is good. I had people encouraging me to do that. And I went to a school, like I said, that was owned by Turkish people, and I was surrounded by Indian kids and kids who were from Iran and Palestine, and still surrounded by Black kids and Asian kids. Like, I was surrounded by different kinds of kids, and so just as much as at home, the home can influence the way you think about everything. School can also. You spend 8 hours a day. In America, at least, you spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Have you ever thought about that? Like the fact that
I was thinking about that recently. I was like, wow.
Like, we spend majority of our school is our home for a while.
Yeah.
For about 12 years, like, school is home. So like, it's just interesting because although, like I said, home can have that influence on you, school also has that big of an influence on you too. So I think that's another big reason why access starts there. Knowing what your jobs can be in this industry, it would start there. You would be educated on that there. Like, that's just, I think that's so important to remember. But then also, when you're thinking about, you know, having access to, like, I don't know, like, not just books, but having access to a future that starts in the classroom. So it's just interesting that we would even have to have discussions on how to think about like employment, how to think about how to write, because your classroom should reflect the world you live in. Less the world, and I feel like what we don't realize is that the world we live in is very much it is a diverse place. We just don't treat it like it is.
Yeah.
So I just find that interesting. Even as we look at these charts, like, it is, I don't know, do publishers look at this chart and be embarrassed? They should. I think
so.
I think about Dr. Gail, and she gets so excited about, the fact that Red Hen is a very diverse, publishing press, a small press, but at least they got different people there. You know what I mean? So there are different people sitting at that table, and even in their like board, their board of not directors, their board.
Yeah, board of directors.
Okay, yeah. Even in their board of directors,
yeah,
they're still a pretty diverse group of people. But hopefully they are also learning balance and recognizing, yeah, we want to do books by these people of color or these people in this religion, or they don't do the religion thing, but like, different kinds of people. They understand that you can still publish white people. You just need to also do this too. Once we get to that point, it'll be nice. Huh?
I don't know. There's like this sign that said it's like a pie chart. This is bad because this is a pie chart, so this is a bad example. But something about like it's not like pie, just giving like them a slice of it doesn't mean you will have any less or something. And I feel like that's is true in so many contexts, but especially like the publishing industry. Like there are a lot of white people in this country. Like white stories and white books will still be written, even if we are.
Even if, yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, like, and there can be more books that aren't just described as like white books, but can represent multiple different people like within the book. Show them having human connections.
And the only thing it does is add more. That's all it does. It's just adding more. It's not subtracting anything.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like you don't get less attention. You just get more experience. Matter of fact, you get more attention because now if we're writing as writers, if we're writing books to represent people as just human, whether they're white or they're Asian or they're Indian or such and such and such and such, suddenly like, yo, we're representing everybody. Everybody is being seen. I shouldn't have to read a book by a Black author and because they don't say I'm dark skinned or I'm light skinned, like because they don't say that, I shouldn't have to read that and immediately think and automatically think that that character is white.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be a thing. But that is very much a thing with Black authors, with Asian authors, with Indian authors. For some reason, we pick up a book and when we read that mug, if you don't specify what skin tone you are or what religion you are even, we gonna automatically think you white. And that's just crazy to me. I've done this several times with my Chinese, with like we have more Chinese students than I think any other Asian demographic, at least in our program. And whenever they write something, I'm always so excited because it's me. I'm always so excited to read their stuff. But when I read it, because they don't specify whether the people are Asian or they're white or they're Black or any of that, more oftentimes than not, I'll automatically go, oh, that person's white. And that in their mind, they might be Asian. And I have to get to the point where I'm like, it doesn't matter, just as long as these characters are doing what they need to do in the story. But it definitely like stresses me out. I get irritated with myself because I'm like, I shouldn't automatically feel that way. And I shouldn't automatically think that way. But that tells you about that actually is like almost a direct line to telling you who's at the publishing table.
Yeah. True.
And the biggest barrier right now is that you ain't at the publishing table. I think that reminds me when I was interviewing Red Hen Press before. I was interviewing Toby Harper and Dr. Gail, and I interviewed Miss Monica. And I think I asked Dr. Gail, like, what is it that needs to happen for representation to become real, like to actually be a thing in publishing? And she was like, well, you might as well just like start your own press. Just start your own press. Because the problem is that right now, still going back to what I'm saying, and even though this is so redundant at this point, like the people at the table don't even see you. Whether you Black or you're Indian or you're Asian, they don't see you. So like you have to be present and be there and be seen for you people even recognize that you're there. And then on top of that, I don't want to say it this way, but they don't even see you as human. You like missed to them. Almost like.
Do you mean like they see you as a demographic, or they're just seeing you as like your.
Like, not even, once they actually look at you, they do see you as a demographic. But just are we a priority on your mind? You know what I mean? Are we of importance to you? Are we on your mind? Do you think, because at this point, think about the fact, like going back to thinking about the fact that subconsciously, automatically, I place white people in the place of every character.
Yeah.
It's without effort,
Mm-hmm.
right? It takes effort for me to think about whether a person has skin tone. So imagine the thought process a publisher has to go through, an editor has to go through, an agent has to go through to remember that other people got darker skin tones, different cultures, different languages, different ways they identify. Like imagine the thought process they got to go through to decide I'm going to pick this book or I'm going to go look for this.
Yeah.
It's like doing the research, that all the thinking I had to do to figure out half this stuff for this podcast.
I know, like my brain, it's melting.
But like it takes a lot more than just a couple of words to do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
it's a process. It's always, it's a work.
Yeah. So imagine that. That has to be rough.
Yeah.
I guess, hold on.
Yeah, I think I need to pause.
Yeah, let me pause.
Here, I'll pause our recording because I gotta go get Penny.
Yeah. Oh, did you pause it? Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, it's recording. Okay, so as we were talking about, basically, we need to figure out how to think about diversity and representation and how to make people more aware of how the industry works through education. And it needs to start at youth. It needs to start at a young age, just like any other job, like medicine or doctors, or medicine, being a doctor, being a lawyer, law, all of that, those things are considered at a very young age. Literary communities and the roles that people play in them also need to be considered at a young age as well. And we don't really need to go over money again. We talked about it, right? So we're gonna move off. So we went really heavy into this section. And in the midst of being really heavy into this section, we also end up giving a couple of thoughts, at least, not necessarily tools directly, but thoughts. So I think what we need to do is go ahead and talk about those tools. And I think, Elena, this is totally up to you. This is your ticket.
So we have compiled a list of tools of literary citizenship that will help, people who are either wanting to get into the publishing world or writers or readers or all of the above. And I think that, as Marissa said, we've touched on a lot of these, and we've also acknowledged that the term literary citizenship itself is not perfect, and there are things that we have to work through, and even some of these tools maybe aren't necessarily perfect, but we wanted to acknowledge that they're there and that they're things that we should really be thinking about in creating our new generation of literary citizens. Oh, and actually the one other thing, kind of to bridge us from the discussion of barriers to the tools of literary citizenship, is I found this article. Actually, is kind of a controversial article that a woman wrote about, I think she wrote it in 2014, but I think the article is titled, Marissa, do you still have that pulled up?
Let's see.
Didn't hyperlink it. If not, no worries.
I might have it.
Salon.
No, don't look at my evals, y'all.
That's okay. I can just talk about it and explain it.
Yeah, I think I turned it off.
It's not. So basically, it's by a woman named Becky Tux. Her last name is spelled Tuch, if you want to look it up. Also, we can try and link all of these articles that we've referenced in the description. But essentially what she says is that she doesn't like the term literary citizenship. And the reason why she doesn't like it is because she feels that it rose out of the corporate publishing movement that, has been happening for decades now. But
Right.
essentially what happened was when the big publishing companies started to form, like the big five, these it became harder, obviously, for indie publishers to make it, and um, the industry became much more money driven, which most of us know. This is not new news, but what she says is that the literary citizen movement came out of that because jobs that, such as, promoting ourselves, um, our writers having to market themselves and things like that, were jobs that someone might have been paid for in the past. So essentially, she said that literary citizenship was just this term that they created to like encourage people to like volunteer their time to like keep, especially the indie publishing world, moving. So I kind of wanted to like acknowledge that there are people out there who just don't even like the term literary citizenship at all.
Mm.
Now, Jane Friedman, who many of us know as well, also sort of wrote an article in response to this, just saying that while that's true from an economic standpoint, what literary community, the way that we're discussing it, and maybe some people would say this is too idealized, but it's more than just the money, the bottom line. It's about like fostering that community and collaboration, and those are things that are really important. And yes, it would be really nice if the industry supported more literary citizenship and if it was built in more in ways that would earn people money. And that is definitely a valid critique of that, which we just discussed for a really long time. But that being said, I think we can also acknowledge that there are still merits to being a literary citizen and to, having that sort of collaborative literary community. And so that's what we want to go into with these tools. Do you have anything to add, Marissa? You want me to keep going?
Yeah, keep going.
So, one thing that we noticed when we were compiling this list of tools is that a lot of them seem kind of basic and things that we already know about. And we acknowledge that, but we just want to say that we want you to view them as tools in your toolbox to becoming literary citizens. And the first is obviously social media. So it's no strange concept that the literary community expands into social media like Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Twitter, I think, is more there's a lot of big name writers on Twitter, and I feel like it's very, I don't know, a millennial thing also in a way. I don't know, Marissa, you know what I mean? Like people,
Yeah.
and even above that, but it's a platform where a lot of people discuss books and like things that are going on in the community. And there are certain people who are really into Twitter. I know from personal experience that Marissa and I are not, neither of us are into Twitter as a tool. But that's another thing that I wanted to say is that, these tools, like similar with what we've talked about in class with building your writer platform and marketing for yourself, they should be a very like personal, like things that are based on your identity and your personality and things that you're comfortable with. So like for me, I probably wouldn't view tools or Twitter as one of my personal tools for literary citizenship, just because I've never actually had a Twitter other than ones that I run for work and such. But I've never had one personally. It's just not my thing, but some people are really into it. And that's a great platform for them to communicate with publishers, like see articles, have important discussions. Now, TikTok and Instagram are both two forms of social media that have really, I think, blown up in the literary community lately, especially with younger readers. Yeah, like there's book talk, which is this whole new thing. And I was actually having a discussion with one of my good friends from college the other day, and she's works in finance, like but she loves to read just for fun. And she said, "Oh, Elena, I just read this like amazing book series on TikTok." or that I found on TikTok. Like she got the recommendation from TikTok and I was like, oh, okay, what is it? And it was like this book series that I had read like 10 years ago. And I just, and I looked, so she sent me some of the book talks, as you can call them, about this. And like, there's all of these books, especially in like the young adult, I think it was a young adult fantasy series, and
Yeah.
that are really just blowing up. And so I think as our society evolves and more forms of social media and communication become available, as like, so will tools of literary citizenship. And hey, people might not view TikTok as a super like literary platform, but people are having discussions about books on there, and people are sharing their thoughts on books. And
Yeah.
same with Instagram, and which we will talk more about later, I think, right, Marissa? Like books
Yeah.
as a topic. But you know, people, they're all tools of literary citizenship where people are connecting with one another and talking about texts and talking about things that they like and things that they don't like. And sometimes those talks about books lead on to more important conversations as well,
Yeah.
about our own lives and societies and things in the world that we see that we want changed. And I think it's important not to lose sight of that. So let's see, another tool of literary citizenship, we've got just like being aware of like one's target audience if you are a writer, and who your fans are, and you know, thinking about who is reading these texts. And then, and also the kind of books that you are writing, if you are a writer, go out and read those same books yourself and engage in those conversations about those books. It's a very reciprocal relationship. And I don't think it's limited to a specific genre, you know, or it could be poetry um, or genre fiction or literary fiction or any combination overlapping of all of those different categories. But I think that you know, that discussion that can be had, and that finding of a group of like-minded individuals, or even maybe not even like-minded, but just people that you can have a conversation with and feel safe with and feel like you're going to be pushed. That's all tools of literary citizenship that we might not even think that we're doing, but I bet many of us are actually doing that right now. The next thing is writers' websites. If you guys know, Marissa and I did a whole like workshop series last semester on the writer website. And these are really great tools of citizenship. And to a certain extent, they don't cost money. And I mean, theoretically, none of the things that I've just mentioned cost money, which is something that we've discussed in the barriers section. Is that a correct statement? Did I miss something that costs money?
No. To Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, none of that costs money. Knowing what you know with your audience or with your fans, because target audience and your rhetorical audience are two different things. But even that doesn't require you to have any money. You just got to be aware.
Yeah.
And writers' websites, you just got to pay your subscription.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Or or use a free site like Wix or something where you have to have Wix.weebly, which is totally fine when you're starting out as a writer. Or even like, this doesn't even have to be a writer website, it can be a book reviewer website, you know, or both. A lot of people have both. Or blogging, book blogging, op-eds is another one that we have listed there. So there's a lot of ways that, like we said, that don't cost money, that you can become a literary citizen. And another thing that we also talked about in our writer's website, but I wanted to emphasize here as an aspect of literary citizenship, is if you do have a website where you're, you know, posting blogs or contents or, you know, reviews, those things, don't be afraid to ask other people to come on to your blog, or to ask people to guest blog on theirs, and then you can hyperlink each other. In the world of the internet, not only are you going to get more sites on your writer website, but you're also creating that community and becoming a literary citizen in that sense. And then we have the other two things, which I think are what are mainly thought of, like when we think about literary citizenship, is, supporting local businesses, local bookstores, small presses, but also, following people who like the same books as you, Bookstagrammers, follow social media readers, or even follow like book reviewers if you're into more formal book reviews than is on
Right.
like Goodreads or just on a random person's Bookstagram or social media account. Like I said, support your writers' websites, link to one another's posts, interview someone on your website, and then link to their website. And, it's not, being a literary citizen is acknowledging like that you're part of that two-way street of the literary community. Like it's not a solitary thing. That's kind of what we've been emphasizing this whole presentation.
Right.
It's important to remember here. Another thing, so when we're thinking about local bookstores and small presses, obviously it's important as we're able to support those, recognizing that sometimes, depending on where we're living in the world or where we're at, or what sort of text we need to get a hold of, you might have to go to the Amazons of the world, but if you can help it and if you can afford it, looking to local bookstores is always good. And then also looking to your small presses and local literary organizations in your area. Do you want to click on the CLMP link for us,
Mm-hmm.
Marissa? Okay, so the CLMP stands for Community of Literary Magazines and Presses, and Dr. Gale introduced us to this organization. But because, so our initial project, we should give the backstory here, was we were really interested in learning about this topic of literary community, but we wanted to learn about it on more of a global scale and see how smaller independent organizations across the world are fostering literary communities and sort of, seeing what sort of tools they're using.
Right.
But unfortunately, because of like time constraints and just everything going on, it was like difficult to continue that project right now. Maybe someday down the line we'll be able to finish it, because we did make contact with someone from CLMP who's super sweet. But yeah, CLMP is a great resource to know about, especially if you are looking to find ways to be more of a literary citizen, or to find, literary communities or organizations that speak to you. So and what I like about the CLMP website is they have actually a map. Do you want to go to the maps, or I think it's under the stats? Is it? Yeah. Tab. So is it going to load? Yes. Ooh. So basically, CLMP is an international organization, and they have publishing presses and independent literary magazines all over the world that they're partnered with. And so, yeah, like you can see, there's one in Hong Kong, and Australia has some, and then there's a ton in North America. And so I know, like, I scrolled in. I'm from Oregon, and so I scrolled onto Oregon and was like looking at some of the independent literary organizations that were there, and I never heard of most of them. So that was kind of eye-opening, but they definitely made me want to read more about them. So yeah, it's a really good place to go if you're interested in that, I guess, geographical component. We're in such like a weird time in the world where geography doesn't matter as much. Like, you've noticed that we haven't really talked about being together in person at all in this whole presentation as like an aspect of literary community, which I think is so interesting. I was thinking about that when you were talking earlier, Marissa. Because like, what are the merits of, being like physically in a literary community with someone? I think that's an important thing to consider. But we all do have ties to like where we're from geographically. And I think it's cool to see, maybe both in places that you would like to go and also where you've lived, what sort of organizations are there. I know I was looking earlier, and Red Hen Press is in CLMP, obviously, and as is Kaya, which we've talked about. So yeah, so they're all smaller organizations that are really good to look into.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have anything to add on CLMP?
No.
No?
I mean, I guess it's just really cool actually that we even can see the way that works. Because I think we came up with that project idea way before it was like a thing where we could see that there were literary communities anywhere else, but it's kind of having that awareness
Yeah.
that there are communities everywhere else. And that was why that project was, I really want to try to finish
Yeah.
that project, because it just made me think about something that Dr. Gale said in class often. She says a couple of different times, but just mentioned the fact that when she went to Japan, for example, like the 50 Shades of Grey not selling in Japan was so like weird to her, I guess, like confusing. She didn't understand why. And as a person who's watched plenty of enough anime and enough Japanese television and movies and that sort of thing, I understood immediately why. But it's just something, it makes you realize that as a publisher, as an editor, as a literary agent, you need to kind of notice stuff. You
Yeah.
know, like if you got a sale over here, you need to know what that literary community is like. What energy are they coming with? What do they care about? What do they not care about? And that might be time consuming, but it's important to know so that you can not just sell, but you can grow a community that is, going back to what we talked about in barriers, reflected of humanity and diversity. So I think it's really cool. The CLMP is giving people access to that, to at least giving them a visual access to the fact that those literary communities exist somewhere else.
Yeah, definitely. So, the last thing that we wanted to throw out there for tools is partnership opportunities. So, and this goes along with what I said about writer websites. Sorry if we're sounding redundant here, but these are important things. You should listen to us. um, but there's importance of partnerships among writers and readers. Like if you're a good writer, you're a reader. If you're a good reader, you might try writing too. There's just they're very reciprocal relationships. Same with reviewers, and just the importance of this collaborative aspect of literary community, because that's what it is. And I think one of the things that I love Jane Friedman, this, but one of the things that she said in one of her articles about literary citizenship was having an attitude of abundance, which instead of scarcity, which essentially means rather than focusing on some of the things that the literary community lacks, or maybe like we wish there was more of in the literary community, which I don't necessarily agree here with ignoring those things. I'm just explaining her point. But
Just so you know.
just so you know. But having this attitude of abundance is kind of goes in with that being collaborative as well, because oh no, the neighbor's dog is going off. We can cut that out. Anyways, attitude of abundance is always looking towards what you have at your disposal and how you can use it. And I think that as literary citizens, we do have a lot at our disposal, especially, today we have like social media accounts, we have, the internet, which is this amazing thing that's scary, but it interconnects us all. And so I think that this idea of partnership goes along with that as well, because just rather than viewing the literary community as something that's really competitive and everyone is always working against each other, viewing it as something where actually people really have to work together a lot to get anything done in publishing. Like,
Boy.
yeah, like when we were listening to Toby and Monica and Tanzika talk about their jobs at Red Hen Press, like they all have to bounce ideas off of each other so much, and they have to work together as a team to get with the rest of the Red Hen Press team as well to get anything done and get anything published. And so I think that this idea that people have about being a writer, being a part of a literary community where you're counting how many publications you have against one another and how much did you get in royalties for this. I don't know if that happens. I feel like I've heard that it does. And I think that's really damaging, and it should be more of a collaborative effort where, we're helping each other out. And that's what literary citizenship is. And that's what I hope as a new generation of literary citizens we are able to do.
Yeah, I think too, when we think of a partnership, we didn't really get into the dichotomy that we had. I talk a lot, y'all, but we made an outline, right? Like, and in our outline, there was the discussion of like indie publishers versus that dichotomy, not necessarily versus, but that dichotomy between indie presses and big publishing. And along with that is this ivory tower mentality that a lot of us have because we have a master's degree. And you think I'm joking, but I've had professors like come at me in a certain way about being a writer or taking on jobs that aren't teaching because they are stuck in this mentality that having that degree is of utmost importance, right? That also falls into the indie press kind of like that literary citizenship is very much pushed by the ivory tower, and very much, and the ivory tower very much supports the indie press, right? But what that ends up doing is that we become imbalanced in how we work together, how we look at big publishing, and how big publishing looks at us, if they look at us, right? And there's a need there to, like I said earlier, when we're talking about who's at the table and how are they thinking at the table, there's a need there in partnership to be balanced so that there isn't a dichotomy, because at the end of the game, we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to release and give information through creative means, right? So, and of course, the issue always comes around back to money. And it makes me think about who's that gave that presentation. She was super excited. Sarah.
Yeah.
My bad. Sarah. Ashley gave a totally different presentation, Marissa. Okay.
It's okay.
Sarah gave this awesome presentation there. She was super excited. And she was showing us all this money that, Penguin Random House were earning, HarperCollins, all them, they were earning in the past, and well, not in the past, but maybe 6 years ago. And it was interesting because I think we talked about this offline, but just like the lack of like the money, the money difference. So for Red Hen Press, I know last year, well, in our 2020, our 2019-2020 school year, Dr. Gale came to our access class and she was talking about what their budget was for the year at Red Hen. And she was saying it's about $1 million, right? And I was looking, I think it was when I was looking at Sarah's presentation, and I noticed that it was like 11 million. I think 11 million for Penguin Random House. And I was talking to Elena about this.
That's the top, like the total budget, or that the top book made?
I think it was the total budget.
Okay.
That's what I understood. But it was something about those numbers that just kind of made me feel like, is there that much of a difference from an indie press and a big publisher?
I think it depends on the press.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course it depends on the press, but because even to think about Grey Wolf, for example, Grey Wolf, pretty big, don't really know their full budget, but
they like 5 million, or are they not that much? Maybe I'm bringing that up. I'll look it up.
I can't, because I don't I know, of course, it's a little more than Red Hint, but I don't think it's at 11 million.
Mhm. 4 million. I was close. Okay.
That's dope. Yeah, I think, well, when you think about that and how much, I think we talked about this in terms of like, is there a lot of risks being taken in terms of what's being published? Because the excuse for not publishing a lot of things is always who's in the market for that? Who is the rhetorical audience for that? Who is going to like not just read the stuff, but do something after they read it? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of risks don't get taken because no one knows what the risks are. And so I think that's the kind of what makes a difference between the independent publisher and the big publisher.
Right.
Not money, not just money. Of course, money is a big part of it, but it feels like indie publishers take a lot more risks.
They do.
You know?
And I think that's what, we've learned is that indie publishers, yes, they have to look at money, but they're also, because they're in indie press, and especially, the non-profit indie presses, that doesn't have to be their bottom line always, is the money aspect. They can take those risks. They can choose books based on, what the message that the book is saying and truly falling in love with the book. I think that there was an essay in our What Editors Do book that actually. But anyways, I don't need to find it necessarily. But I think, yeah, but I do agree that there is perhaps too strong of a dichotomy between the indie and the big publishing world. But that's the big concern though, is if that gap, at least to me, if that, I still want there to be publishers out there that are able to publish things based on, falling in love with the book and feeling like it's a good message that needs to be told versus just like, is this going to sell? Money, money, money. But I think if I'm understanding you right, what you're saying is that you feel like these bigger publishers should be able to take more risks because of their large budgets.
Yeah, and I'm not in the press. So like, I'm not at the
I don't know
table. Yeah, I'm like, but it feels like, what's the point of publishing if you ain't taking the risk? Like, what's the point? What you doing it for?
Yeah.
Like, especially when you are that big, you have that many connections. What are you doing it for if you're not going to do it worth like? And my point being, like, I don't know if it's even that much money. Like that's why I was like, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to remember, like what that money was for, that 11 million. But like, I don't even know if it's really that much money, or if like, and this is getting into a little bit into reader declining readership.
Yeah. Did we talk about that as a barrier?
No, I didn't, because I was like, I don't know how to jump into that. In terms of like literary citizenship, of course you want people to read, but at the same time, like, as somebody who's producing for that, like, you want the person to read, just read. Like, that's what you really want. But of course, like, we've discussed this before with me and you, and I've talked about this in class, just the fact that if the issue is that people are moving too fast, they got stuff to do all day, and audiobooks are the thing that's selling, then we might have to return to audio a little bit for a little while. Like, I think
Stay tuned for Marissa's second podcast, Why Audiobooks Are the Honestly, I titled it right there.
Yeah. I'm just saying that it could be beneficial, and not to say that it's the permanent plan. You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of things in literature is about sentimental value. My stepmom is very much a Jane Austen's fan, and Jane Austen fan, and she's very much a sentimental book holder. Okay. And even as I say that, I get irritated thinking about my mama, because my mom, I remember she asked me one time, I was moving around. I think I was moving here. I think I want to say I was moving to California. And she was like, "You want me to throw these books away?" And I was like, "Why would you throw my books away?" She was like, "They're just sentimental value. They're not even, they don't matter." And I was like, "Yes, they do.
No, they matter.
They do matter."
I can't get rid of books. You know, Marissa used to come in my car, and I would have because I couldn't fit all my books in my bookshelf, and so I kept a tub of books in the trunk of my car, and I would just, it was like my little traveling library. That is sentimental value for you. Keep them in your car because your house doesn't have any more room.
Yeah. But I think this makes me think about this. I thought about this last night. When it comes to, you know, generational differences. I'm going to say that it makes me think about this because Dr. Gill brought up the fact that audiobooks and, well, ebooks specifically don't really sell that well, right? And I think the difference is, especially because it was expected to sell well to millennials, is that millennials were born reading textbooks, paper textbooks, and graduated high school reading paper textbooks. Whereas I think me and you, that borderline, grew up getting iPads in school.
Yeah.
Having computers to do work on. I was getting a lot of my books offline. I was listening to YouTube was providing me with audiobooks at the top. Like, you know what I mean? So like we had access to that all the devices needed to get an ebook or to listen to an audiobook, right? So I think as time changes, the way we could attract people from Gen Z and that crack between millennial and Gen Z is by catching their eye with whatever's on their screen. We're living in a time of streaming. It's not a game with streaming right now. It is not a game. And we might as well take the reins on that, you know, like instead of kind of sitting about and kind of being like, but the sentimental value of a book, because anything can become of sentimental value. Cell phones are of sentimental value to people. There are people who still got old cell phones just in drawers.
Yeah,
I ain't gonna ever use them things again.
One of those people.
Yeah, like
I don't know why.
Chargers you ain't ever gonna use again. You can't use those chargers, but you still got them. Like anything can become of sentimental value. Audiobooks can eventually become of sentimental value if they're given if you're able to own them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Have access to them all the time.
I think too, another thing with declining leadership declining readership that also connects to what I was talking about with social media and literary citizenship is, I think because of that millennial sentimental value and because we were raised in like the Harry Potter era where like, and it kind of in the binge watching era as well, you know, where you like get really into something and obsess with it for, you know, a period of time and you want to consume as much as you can. I feel like that just as a person who like consumes literature this way, where I like obsess over a book series or something or a TV show even, and I, you know, watch it all and get it done. I feel like that is almost like in some senses could make up for declining readership because maybe there are less people reading overall, but there are, you know, there's a large enough section of, you know, the literary community that, you know, wants to consume these books really fast and like go through them like pow, 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 pow. So
yeah.
Random thought.
And too, I feel it's like something very interesting to bring up too, is like how indie press books that are published at indie presses, how they might take on that kind of heat, you know, from readers.
Yeah.
Like, do they take on that kind of heat? Do they get that kind of attention? How do we generate that in small presses where readers feel like they're completely a part of the journey of a writer's growth? Because that's what comes, let's think about what comes with watching a series build and grow and take over in time. People like, oh my gosh, what's the lady's name that wrote City of Glass and
Cassandra Clare?
yes, it's Cassandra Clare. You know, we got Harry Potter, but then also Cassandra Clare. That lady is could she stop writing? Like, just sit down. Like, I'm tired of her. But she is constantly putting something out, and people are constantly in love with what she puts out, right? Not that all of it's good. A lot of it's not healthy mentally or emotionally.
No,
But,
that is something.
Yeah, so something's off in those books. But people stick with her, you know what I mean? And part of that definitely is concept, definitely. But another part of that is technique and delivery.
Yeah.
How that writer is constantly putting out something and how that writer is able to release something consistently all the time, keeping people's attention. And
sorry.
No, go
Finish your
ahead.
thought, and then I'll ask a follow-up question.
Oh, okay. And then two, though, fandom is so serious. People don't take fandom very seriously, unless we're talking about sports. But fandom in if we're talking about K-pop, fandom is severe.
Huge.
Groups is huge.
An illness? No, not.
Almost, bro. Like, for real. So sometimes
not
it
K-pop,
can be.
but like some types of.
We can include K-pop. I love people who know me know I love BTS. Like I've been a BTS fan for how many years? This is my 8th year, I think. But like, I also recognize that some of these girls, not just girls, because we have boys, girls, women who are 40 years old, women who are 60, men who are 50, 30, 22. Our fandom's very big. But recognizing that sometimes it's a little chaotic, but do we work hard? Definitely. Voting and all of that. And it's the same when it comes to fandoms of books, man. Once you build that fandom, see, and I wanted to point out this: the target audience, fans, and rhetorical audience are 3 different things. You have your target audience, right? Who are the people you kind of aiming to, you know, the people that come to mind when you're writing this stuff down, whatever you're writing down. You have your fans, the people who pick up the book and follow you after that first one. But then you have the rhetorical audience that don't just pick up your book and they don't just follow you afterwards, but they're applying whatever you just told them.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And you have to know the difference between all 3 of those so that you know what you need to do once it's time to write that next book. Or you know where you need to go once it's time to write that next book, and you need to pick a publisher or a press that isn't the old one, you know, to make better decisions to reach the people you need to reach. Because just like when you're building your writer's website, you start, I mentioned this when we were talking about writer websites, start the way you want to end. If you want to attract people who are into, like, think about Dr. Blaylock, for example. Dr. Blaylock, he writes
steampunk.
I can never remember that. Steampunk.
Yeah, steampunk.
Yeah.
One of his, which is like sci-fi and Victorian historical fiction.
Yeah, like Wild Wild West. Was that considered steampunk? I felt like it was as a kid. Probably not. But steampunk is his niche. That's his thing, right? And when you go to his website, that's what the concept of it is, right? So he started by attracting the people he wanted to write to, you know, and he made sure that everything he wrote and everything about him promoted that. So if you start that way, that's the attention you're going to start. And it's easier to explain in terms of K-pop. So it's easier for me to explain. So like when we're talking about certain groups, different groups have a different culture, a different way they act with each other. And based off of how they act with each other, the fandom also acts the same way. For example, in BTS, the leader of the group has a 148 IQ. His IQ is very high, and he was #1 in his city in testing. So in our fandom, education is like extremely important. We have tutoring programs, we have therapy programs on Twitter, and we have programs that focus on readership. We promote certain books that the boys might read, and that might have something to do with different concepts they had in music videos. But because he started out by using books to write music and sort of that sort of thing, that's how the fandom ended up being. And that's the kind of people he attracted. That's the kind of people the group attracted. People who love to read, people who loved education, people who love psychology. So it's the same with your readership, with your personal readership. You have to know these things so that you can attract who you want to attract. They'll attract people who are going to continue to follow you, and attract people who are that you're going to affect for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
That's how serious reading is. Well, I don't know if we realize that as we're writing, but that is how serious reading is. That's how serious writing is. So I just think,
sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. You had a question.
Oh yeah. I was gonna say my follow-up question, I mean, it's very related. So just thinking about, fandoms and how crazy they are, and book fandoms specifically, do you think that being a part of like a book fandom, and engaging with other people talking about books and characters, do you think that I mean, I know what I think, and I think I know what you think, but do you think that counts as literary citizenship? Because I think, I think it's a no-brainer, but I also think that because literary citizenship is like sort of an academic term in a lot of ways, or maybe, combined with, not combined isn't the right word. Maybe accompanies like academic discourse, is the subject of literary citizenship. I think that some people wouldn't view it as such. Like I do, for sure, because, what is literary citizenship if it's not, supporting people who, believe in a book or a series or a character the same way that you do, and supporting that author, and, just being a part of that community.
Right.
But I think, one of the things about looking at these tools of literary citizenship is acknowledging that they might not be what we think they would be, because of how our brain has been wired to like view literary citizenship as like an academic term.
Right. And that goes back to, I think, what I was saying about ivory towers.
Yes.
Really getting our own heads, man, when I tell you balance is important, getting our own heads out of our own tails and thinking that we're better than because I chose to go with the indie press, or because I feel like I know more, I have more scholarship than somebody else. Now, do I be dogging writers in big publishing who don't know how to write? Yeah, because you don't know how to write. But but at the same time, I have mad respect for their ability to produce fast literature. You know what I mean?
There's some author who wrote like, I don't know, I forget I wonder what the record of most books written in a year is.
Oh, most books written in a year?
Or not in a year. I swear someone wrote like 40 books in a year, and I just don't think that that's humanly possible. But
yeah,
write 40 pages and call each page a book.
Now when I say fast literature, I'm not just talking about releasing books. I'm talking about the story itself is just quick.
Yeah.
It's just full of when people use the word action, I always think like, hey, this ain't a Fast and Furious book, this is a romance book. But like action, when they say action, they really mean like something is constantly happening. There's never a point where the characters are just kind of sitting and chilling out. Something important is constantly happening. So writers who can do that and like almost distance themselves from reality to write it, like, I give lots of love because it takes a lot of imagination to produce work that is constantly putting out action and emotions and people. That's where we get angst from. That's where we get the most pain from. That's where we get most anxiety from. I'm gonna ask YA writers to get over it, stop, because ain't nobody's kid that angsty. I'm just, please stop. Can kids be normal? But yeah, I think I give lots of love to that, and I want to show mad love and respect for. I think I think about this a little bit when I think about Netflix, because even Netflix does the exact same thing big publishing does when they put out their own TV shows or their own movies. Everything's very quick paced. None of it really makes sense, and none of it's like that would happen. But because they're trying to appeal to the minds of people who are constantly busy, right? We're constantly busy, even when we're not busy. Even when we're just laying around watching the movie. I think we talked about this before, but there was this one time that I think we talked about this, and I said that it's interesting that when you watch a movie the first time, you're just watching it to see what happens. But when you watch it the second time, you start noticing the things that are wrong with it. That's how humans consume things, whether that's a book, it's a movie, it's a TV show. So like, I think you kind of have to give respect to people who can produce things that are satisfactory to that degree and in that way. Is that the best way? No. But you got to show love and respect to that. And I think big publishing takes that on very well, takes on those fast-paced books that are going to sell money, because you can read it one time, put it down, go to the next book. And the fandom's going to cheer it on. They're going to support it. If there's a book award, they're going to vote for that mug. If there's especially in the years of social media, that is such a big deal. If there are awards online for books, best believe social media kids, adults, everybody finna be on that mug voting and talking. And even with Instagram, which I love Instagram. Twitter getting on my last nerve. I only go there for BTS. But Instagram is awesome because you can write 2 or 3 different paragraphs of just discussion on Instagram. So if you have an opinion about a book, you have room and space to just talk for hours with people, going back and forth, having a full-blown conversation about why you hate this book, why you love this book, what you think could be different. Like the same thing you're doing on your blogs, hopefully you can do on Instagram. You know what I mean? On TikTok, I don't really know because I don't get on there. It's depressing. TikTok's depressing. But but it doesn't mean it's not there for you to, vibe with and get in touch with and enjoy, in your own way. And that's where the fans are. That's where the people are. Like, I think it was so interesting, Ansley, a couple of weeks ago when Daisy did her presentation on social media. Ansley was kind of like, she said, I wanted to say something, but I was like, okay, I'm too tired. But Ansley said something like, people who don't do social media might just feel a certain kind of way about, having their private lives be on social media. Then don't post your private life. Don't post your private life. Don't post it. Like, you can still be a part of social media and not post your private life. There's a difference between your private life and the things you want people to see. You know what I mean? You have control over your social media. The social media don't have control over you unless you allow it to. You have control. And as a writer, in the times we live in, this is your chance to take full advantage of that audience, those fandoms. this is your time. So why not do it? Like, I don't understand that panic. You are secluding yourself and then restricting yourself from a lot more creative room because you don't know how to work it. You don't know how to figure it out. Like, nah, bro. I ain't gonna let nothing stop me from figuring it out so that I can grow as a writer and I can grow a readership if that's what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why these tools are important. You got to take them seriously. Writers' websites. I think if we're talking about writers' websites and local bookstores and small presses and that sort of thing, these are things that we've been taught. I think more social media and target audience and partnership are things that are kind of new ideas.
Yeah, no, definitely, like when you think of literary citizenship. Oh, and support small bookstores, presses, and yeah, I think those are just go to conferences, which we don't have on here, but we did talk about it before, and as a barrier for money wise. But if it like conferences, if people are able to go, are great citizenship tools as well. So that's important to note. But yeah, those are kind of like, I feel like what we're taught, at least again, from that like academic viewpoint, which by the way, I don't mean academic viewpoint in a bad way. I just mean like there's a difference.
I'll probably be in a bad way. I'll probably be in a bad way.
It definitely has its, yeah.
It has its things. I think it's like anything else. You say one thing, but you don't realize what you're saying. Like in terms of diversity, for example.
Yeah.
You say you want diversity, but you don't really know what that means.
Yeah. Or you just don't know how to, put it into practice.
Yep.
So.
Yeah. That I don't know if we explain partnership well enough, but I think in terms of partnership, it's just making sure you're sharing and communicating. Ooh, did I or did I not emphasize that at the website building? Yo, communication is key. Communicate. The worst that somebody else can say is what, Elena?
No.
Right? Like the worst they can say is no. So in your literary citizenship, whether you're trying to get something or you're trying to give something, get or give, the worst somebody can tell you is no. And that's in anything. That's in life. The worst somebody can tell you is no. Like, but even in partnership, connecting with people, networking, connecting with colleges, connecting with other reviewers. And those reviewers, when we're talking about reviewers, we're talking about those people on social media too, not just websites you got to go figure out and find.
Yeah.
We're talking about reviewers. We're talking about those people that you see on Goodreads that are in the little comment section. We don't see them as reviewers really, but they are.
Yeah, and if you want reviewing practice, make a Goodreads and practice how you would review. And then if you want to actually publish your reviews somewhere someday, then you will have practice and you can use some of your excerpts to show that you can review.
I think a lot of times we've talked about gatekeepers in class. Well, we've read about them.
Yes.
I don't know if we talked about them, but we read about them. And gatekeepers are always the thing that people are intimidated by. So they never go for it. They never try to figure out how to partner with somebody because, this person's in charge and I'm not good enough. And it's whatever, what did Jillian call it? She called it imposter syndrome. Whatever that is, not only is it that the worst somebody can say is no, but I want to emphasize something Tom Zollner.
Tom Zollner.
Tom Zollner,
also known as Tom Holland.
Tom Holland. So Zollner, he said, these people are not geniuses. They're not geniuses. They're not people who, some of them didn't even study the stuff you study. So you panicking and thinking they're going to know more than you, be better than you, think you are not worth it, whatever it is you got in the back of your head that's keeping you from going out there and talking to people, asking people questions when you don't know the answer, stepping up and stepping out for yourself, it's all in your head. You done made some stuff up. These people are not, they're not, when they reject you, I think this is something this is what Tom was emphasizing. If and when they reject you, they are rejecting you based off of business. It ain't got nothing to do with you, right? And so when we're talking to other writers, and I'm still having to put this into practice. What I emailed Carolyn Kellogg, who's a really big deal in terms of book reviewing, right? And I emailed her, and it took me about 2 months to email her. One, I didn't really have the time, but I didn't know what to email her about. Like, I wanted to just connect. I just wanted to like make that connection and let her know that I exist and that I'm doing book reviews and that I would love for her to be my mentor or whatever, right? But I didn't know how to go about saying all that. And finally, I just used the excuse that we needed information for student hour, for the student conversation hour. But at the same time, I was like, I should have just like emailed her. And then by the time I started emailing her, you know how I am, I just was like, all right, shoot. And I just started talking. But it does take that first step and realizing, like, putting that idea into practice. These people are not any better than you. They are human just like you are, make mistakes just like you do. They failed at some things just like you are going to. It is okay. They're not gods, and they're really not gatekeepers. They just like to think that they
let them be gatekeepers.
Man, say that, Elena. Unless you be gatekeepers, they're really not gatekeepers. I think the only thing that makes it hard to say is like with literary agents and publishers who have justified and gathered all the right to tell you no based off of whether they even want to read your stuff or not. Like, you know, I think that's the only thing that that makes it like, ooh, are you sure they're not gatekeepers? Because she told me but they're just like, there's this one literary agent here, there's one over here and over here and over here and over here and over here. And then two, we live in a time of self-publishing. Don't let that deter you either. Don't let it stop you. If you're gonna do what you're gonna do, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. Don't let it stop you. I just don't. I don't think you should let anything stop you from doing what you think you need to do. So I just think it's really important to emphasize that point about partnership. Don't be afraid to partner up with other writers. Plenty of writers partner together, write books and series and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to partner up with your readers. Letting them, talking to them, get on Instagram, doing Instagram lives and reading your books on Instagram, or like reading sections of your books on Instagram, like Chimanda. Oh my gosh, I can never say her name right because I suck. You know who I'm talking about?
Adichie?
Adichie, yes. She gets on Instagram sometimes, so she reads her books. She's like gets on there, records herself. She reads, and people just gather and just listen to her read in her accent. It's about being completely you for you. That's what literary citizenship is about. In a very big, way bigger. It's a way bigger point than you think it is. But you really have to be yourself and be comfortable to do any of this stuff. Social media, figuring out who your audience is, supporting anybody else. You got to know you before you can support anything. Just like loving yourself before you love anybody else.
It's like why on the airplanes they say put your oxygen mask on before you help others.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
That's the example that I always use for like taking care of yourself.
Yeah.
But should we move on?
Sure. Saw the hammer disappear. So cute. Okay. So basically we went off on a tangent there, but that's what this is. That's the point of this. So at the end of it all, literary citizenship, a literary community, the basic thing is connecting, right? How do we connect? We might connect through social media, and I'll get a little bit into that in a second, but might connect through that through websites, might connect through literary events and organizations. These are the basic things that we all know. And what we would love is for everybody else, if you're watching this before class, hopefully you're watching this before class, but to just like come to class with ideas on ways you can connect with yourself as a writer, as a reader, but also connect with the world as a writer and as a reader. Because these are just basic things that we are kind of supposed to know. Notice that I didn't put journals on here because I forgot. But don't forget that, because if that's what you want to spend your money on, that's on you.
Yes, journals are important.
Journals
If you want to look at some good literary journals, go to the LMP website. Local, independent literary journals. Especially like most of the international ones on there are primarily like literary journals and not presses, but yeah, they're cool.
Yes. And don't be afraid to, I'm still trying to figure out how to get my foot into outside of America in terms of books and things, because if I think about not literary, but the way the book culture is in China, for example, a lot of the books that become TV shows or movies or that really big are actually internet books like Wattpad, or like Japan. And everybody knows Japan just produces a lot of different things. But even that way, connecting outside of your local community helps you as a writer, helps you progress the community here. Because now you're bringing you're sharing ideas, y'all swapping ideas, even if they don't want your ideas. You are preparing a new generation, and you are preparing a new generation of readers, and you're preparing a new generation of writers, which is what we want to constantly try to do. It's okay to follow our predecessors, both as readers and as writers.
Right. Like they probably, if you know about them, they probably did something well. And so, and so it's probably good to, take some hints from them. And I know I do when I think about my own writing life. I look at writers that I like and want to be like, and yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's the basic expectation, but don't be afraid to change the game. Because nobody else stays the same. Why would we? Why do we have to when no one else does?
Yeah.
But yeah, there are a lot of keywords today. But today, I also want to emphasize there is just one person that I really, when we finally finished our paper, that really helped me get a perspective on just how important balance is, especially in terms of connecting with people. And that's this girl here. She's so sweet. Her name is Rochelle. She's a Bookstagrammer, and she mostly focuses on books that are about BIPOC or BIPOC. So she's constantly updating her Instagram. You guys should totally follow her. But she's reading a lot of things, and none of them are in any specific order, and none of them are just from the most recent years, and plenty of them are really old books. But she also has her Linktree, which lets you know that she has like a blog, and to follow her on Twitter and all these different things, which is really, really cool. I'm trying to get her to check out book blog, right? And she has a book blog, and she's interviewed authors and all sorts of things, right? And this is literary citizenship for sure. Wouldn't you say so, Elena?
Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, because I mean, she's doing a lot of things. She's got her Instagram and she's doing read and reviews. And I saw that she did, right there, she had an interview posted. So she's also
Mm-hmm.
like connecting in that way.
Mm-hmm. Now, now Rochelle is actually, she just graduated last week from her undergraduate. And I just think that's important to emphasize because you might feel like you just don't have it. You know what I mean? You might feel like you don't have the access, nor do you have the gumption to tackle, I don't know, whatever it is you're terrified of tackling. But then you have people like Rochelle, really young, just pushing through and tackling it and doing everything she can and doing everything she wants to do. And I think that is the biggest thing I want to emphasize about following Bookstagrammers, because there's something about Bookstagrammers that is very much about being themselves. And that's why I was emphasizing, self-love before you go out and go, I'm gonna support so-and-so and such and this and this. A big part of especially if we're talking about social media and we're talking about reading books, period. A big part of what grabs people's attention on social media is how much of yourself you are being. Not just how much of yourself you're revealing, but how much you're being yourself. If you're mad, you're mad, and you're being mad. If you're happy, you're happy, and you're being happy. And I think that's what I really appreciate from Rochelle's channel, from her Instagram specifically, because I really don't get to look at her Bookstagram, or not her Bookstagram, her book blog, because I'm a graduate student. I don't have time to even tempt myself with other people's books. But when you look at like her stories, she's one of those people that's still herself. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. I think something, I know we've talked a lot, so we don't need to go on, or I don't need to go on forever about this, but it's something that we didn't talk about that I think can be a barrier both to literary community and literary citizenship is time. Because like for me, I'm thinking about myself personally, and like time, I'm like almost have anxiety about time because I'm just like always anxious that like I'm not allowing myself enough time for this or that, and I'm very like protective of my time. And so I think it's hard to like, especially when you're a student and you work and do a lot of different things, which most of us do, it's hard to feel like we want to dedicate that time to literary citizenship. um so I think that's something that like I struggle with, and it's really inspirational to see people who are able to, despite, being a student and whatever else Rochelle has going on in her life. I think I saw on one of the links that she's also a teacher, or she had like a teacher link or something.
She has like a link to donate to a specific teacher.
Oh, okay. It's not her. She's not a teacher. Oh, this teacher. Okay. I thought it said donate to me, my classroom. And I was like, is she a teacher too? But I was going to be really impressed. But anyways, yeah, just like seeing someone who can dedicate so much time to being a citizen and, sharing with the world themselves and their literary, likes and dislikes is really inspirational.
Yeah.
And I think even if, we can't go out to like create a blog or a bookstagram, I think there's still like little things that people can do, like starting out by like following a few bookstagrammers, and then you'll just be like seeing them on your feed and you can interact with them. Or if you're not into the bookstagram thing, um you know looking on CLMP and finding a literary press that interests you and maybe looking through their titles, and you could reach out to someone from that press, or you could order one of their books if it looks interesting to you, or see how they're engaging with their community. I think that time barrier, which is a big thing for me, is something that you can get over if you do things in small increments. And I also think that a lot of this stuff, like thinking about a book and reflecting on it, is something that we naturally do when we're reading. So it doesn't take that much extra effort to like write down your thoughts or to share them or to take a picture of the book you're reading, you know?
Yeah,
So,
I think Rochelle, even with that, Rochelle was kind of like, the biggest thing is with being bookstagrammer, it's not hard to have an opinion. It's more of like aesthetically pleasing things and being able to do this kind of stuff, right? And which, oh, I have that book. I have it like literally sitting right beside my hand. But you know, it's being
oh
able
my
to do
gosh, she
this.
has the Gallagher Girls on there. I read those as a kid. Scroll up, those. I tell you I love you, but then I have to kill you. No,
Oh, these right here.
the flower background. Yes.
Yeah.
That's like my middle school life right there. You
I
can take
always
a great
ignored
trip
those.
down memory lane.
Yeah. Oh, that
Yes,
too.
so you're talking about your mom getting rid of books at your house.
Yeah.
This is a book series that my mom just tried to get rid of.
Throw them away, Atlanta. I didn't read those. I remember seeing them though.
They're pretty bad, not gonna lie. But I love them. Sentimental value.
Yeah. See, this is the fun of going through Bookstagram. I haven't finished this book yet because they irritated me, but okay. It really made me mad. And I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna leave it here for another 2 months. But yeah, I think this is what we're missing out on. And when we're talking about social media specifically, and when our generation is not being ourselves. I don't know how else to say that. Like, if I think it's one thing to hear what your professors are saying in terms of literary citizenship and, you know, what's important, you know, these basic things, like I said, you know, supporting small publishers and, you know, going to visit those local bookstores and all that. Those are like the basic things that have been happening for a long time. And now it's time to figure out what else we can add to it from our generation. And a big one is social media. Yeah. And having an opinion and being open about that opinion, no matter where we're at, because that's also part of who we are. And just changing the way we think and how we communicate outside and inside the classroom. Not letting ourselves be so distracted by the fact that indie publishers deserve books to be read, that we ignore the big publishers, and not let the big publishers consume our bookshelves more than those indie publishers. Right. Having that balance. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's really, really important. And to just like, since you have the environment of classmates and professors and all, since you have it, use it. Like,
yeah, we're all already part of a community. Yeah.
You got to build it somehow. Might as well use the one you got. Like, but yeah, I think these are that was a lot in a deep conversation, which is what I really wanted for this, because I think that's what's necessary. Where writers are heartfelt people, we're people that use a lot of heart even when we don't want to. So I felt like that was necessary for this project, especially in thinking about how to connect and how to, you know, be a part and be completely a part. Because I realized that as I look at like some of our professors, most of this comes to me when I'm looking at social media, but when I look at our professors and their Instagrams or their Twitters, I realized that so much of their life is consumed by being a professor. You know what I mean? Like, so much of their life is consumed by being a professor. And while they don't mind, they most likely don't mind it. As individuals, there's so much more to us that we have to figure out how to step outside of that ivory tower and step outside of that community that is very, very much the 1%. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's the 1%. We can't, if we were stuck in that tower and you're stuck in that 1%, you're missing out on that's a big reason you're missing out on probably some of the energy that the big publishing is getting, and the energy that the general public is giving, like, because you're stuck in that 1%, and your mind is always on that 1%. That also requires balance.
Yeah.
So
Does. Okay. We have any last words?
I don't know. Do you have? Oh, those are last words.
Read, read, read. And as Justin Timberlake says, or
No.
Backstreet Boys, bye, bye, bye. Just kidding.
I didn't crack me.
We're taking that out. We're taking that out.
I'm not gonna. I'm going like I didn't hear it. No. No, but that is our presentation. It's a lot to process, and hopefully it helps a lot of different people out, and people can come to some resolutions on their own about how they can be a citizen, because we ain't telling you gotta go spend money. Notice that we didn't emphasize that.
No.
But
yeah, and it's like I said, with tools, like you can choose tools that work for you in your life and the kind of writer or reader or both that you want to be. And yeah, there's not one right way to be a literary citizen. It's just putting the effort in and working to build those connections to form a community. Yep. Bye-bye.
We'll see y'all later. Bye.